It's been about 10 years since the Paris Agreement, when pretty much the whole world agreed to get to net zero. But in that decade, something really strange has happened. It's this paradox. On the one hand, you've had these powerful political forces trying to slam the brakes on climate action. But on the other, the clean energy transition has actually hit the accelerator. So what is really going on here? Let's get into it.
Okay, so let's start with the story of deep contradiction. Because, the headlines, they really don't tell you the whole story.
I mean, this slide just perfectly captures the split-screen reality we're all living in, right? On one side, you have these huge political setbacks, like a U.S. administration pulling out of climate agreements to push more fossil fuels. But then you look at the other side, and during that exact same time, investment in clean energy, it doubled. Solar capacity, more than doubled. EV sales, doubled. So while one story was making all the noise, another, much more powerful one, was quietly unfolding.
Now, to try and counter this undeniable momentum, the fossil fuel industry came up with a really clever new story. It's designed to slow everything down, to make doing nothing sound like the smart, sensible choice. And they gave it this very strategic, very calculated name: climate realism. So let's unpack this idea. What does realism even mean here? And I think more importantly, whose reality are we actually talking about? Okay, so according to the people who push it, climate realism basically says a few key things. First, we should just give up on trying to reduce fossil fuels. Second, they argue that, hey, past energy transitions took a long time, so this one will too. And third, our main job should just be to adapt to whatever comes. In other words, just accept the damage and learn to live with it. Well, this brings us to a few really big questions. And let's start with the most important one, the human one. Can we honestly call a plan realistic if it just brushes off the displacement and suffering of billions of people? Because this is what we're talking about. Scientists are warning that by 2050, which is not that far away, we could see this many climate refugees. We've already seen how a few million refugees can completely destabilize global politics. So just try to imagine what happens when that number isn't a few million, but 1 to 2 billion people on the move. All right, let's pivot to the bottom line. If the staggering human cost isn't enough to convince some people, what about the cold, hard cash? Is it actually realistic to just ignore the mind-boggling economic damage of doing nothing? When you look at the numbers, the choice is just crystal clear. A study from Deloitte found that failing to act could vaporize $178 trillion from the global economy. But acting, that could add $43 trillion. You do the math, that's a $221 trillion swing in our future. We're already losing trillions in housing value and cleaning up after extreme weather. So the easy path of inaction now, it pretty clearly leads to a much harder and much poorer future for everyone. And beyond the people and the money, what about the planet itself? The very ground beneath our feet? Is it realistic to look away from the fundamental, physical ways our world is breaking? Just let's let these sink in for a second. 30 million tons of ice are vanishing from Greenland every single hour. The oceans are 30% more acidic, literally dissolving the base of the marine food web. 9 million people die every year from the air they breathe because of fossil fuels, and half of all the species we share this planet with are at risk of disappearing. The so-called realist approach asks us to just shrug our shoulders at all of this. But here is the hard pivot. That grim reality is only one side of the story. The other side is a technological revolution that is moving way faster than anyone, especially its opponents, ever thought was possible. You want to see something amazing? Let's just look at the predictions from the fossil fuel industry itself. Back in 2015, ExxonMobil said we'd hit 840 gigawatts of solar by the year 2040. What's the reality? We've already blown past that and installed more than 3 times that amount today. OPEC said EV sales would barely move. They're 34 times higher. They said solar would never be cost competitive. Well, it's now the cheapest source of electricity in all of human history. And it wasn't just the oil companies who got it wrong. Check this out. These are the International Energy Agency's own projections for solar. Year after year, their best, most optimistic estimates were just dwarfed by what actually happened. The growth has been genuinely exponential, and it's been catching even the top experts by surprise. So here's the bottom line, the key takeaway from all this. Since the Paris Agreement was signed, the world has installed 2 times more solar power capacity than all new fossil fuel sources combined. This isn't some pie-in-the-sky dream for the future. It's the dominant reality of new energy right now. So this brings up a really important question, right?
If the tech is here and the economics make perfect sense and the growth is just explosive, why aren't we moving even faster? What's holding us back?
This quote, it just cuts right to the chase, doesn't it? The fossil fuel industry's game has changed. Instead of trying to compete on technology, they're focused on capturing policy, on lobbying, and on pushing these false solutions like carbon capture, which for the most part has just been a way to delay real action.
And this second major hurdle is something baked into this system itself. The money just isn't flowing to where it's needed most. Our global financial system is still set up for the old energy world, and that's creating these massive, unfair gaps in the transition.
And look, this is just a shocking picture of that misalignment. The continent of Africa has 60% of the world's best solar resources. I mean, just incredible potential. And yet, the entire continent gets a little over 1.5% of all global clean energy investment. That's not just unfair, it's a colossal failure of the market. So, after all that, where does it leave us? If the technology is ready to go and the economics are on our side, what's the final piece of the puzzle we need to get past these roadblocks? Abraham Lincoln said this during a time of incredible crisis for his country, and he realized that you can't solve new existential problems with old ways of thinking. This is absolutely one of those moments for us to think anew. And this is really the whole thing in a nutshell. The debate about whether we can solve the climate crisis, that's over. We can. We have the solar panels, the batteries, the EVs. The financial argument is a slam dunk. The only barrier left is a human one. And that leads us to the final question. You see, the most important thing to remember is that political will isn't like oil or coal. It's not some finite thing we dig out of the ground. It's a renewable resource. It's generated by us, by people, demanding a better future. So the real question isn't whether we can do this. The real question is, how will we choose to?